It's like the best they can offer is not good enough for us. They're going to have to do better. And if they're not willing to do better, then we're going to have to force this thing in front of a neutral arbitrator to get some better terms.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
The National Association of Letter Carriers reached a tentative agreement with the U.S. Postal Service several weeks back. They sent the agreement out to city carriers across the country, and the results of the vote were announced late yesterday afternoon, 5 p.m. Central, showing that membership overwhelmingly rejected the tentative collective bargaining agreement. Here's a statement from the NALC. The active membership of the National Association of Letter Carriers has voted to reject the ratification of the tentative 2023-2026 national agreement with the U.S. Postal Service. The vote to ratify was 63,680 to reject the agreement versus 26,304 to accept it, as reported by the NALC's ballot committee chairman Paul Rosnowski of Royal Oak, Michigan, branch 3126. The 15-member ballot committee monitored and observed the dispatch, receipt, and tabulation of the ratification ballot conducted by independent companies Mosaic of Cheverly, Maryland, and Survey and Ballot Systems of Eden Prairie, Minnesota. NALC President Brian Renfro issued this statement. NALC has notified the Postal Service of the result of the ratification balloting and our intent to reopen negotiations within 5 days in accordance with Article 16 of the NALC Constitution. Negotiations will not exceed a period of 15 days from when they are reopened. The NALC Executive Council will meet to discuss whether to send a second ballot to each member for ratification or rejection of a potential new tentative agreement, or to proceed to binding interest arbitration. Under the law, decisions of that arbitration board would be final and binding upon the parties. In a Democratic vote, the will of NALC's membership has been made clear. The tentative agreement that represented the best offer the Postal Service put on the table is not enough for America's city letter carriers. We have earned more and we deserve more. Again, this is NALC President Brian Renfro. He continues, we will negotiate in good faith with the Postal Service at the bargaining table during the limited time frame set forth in the NALC Constitution. We call on the Postal Service to do the same. As I made clear since the beginning of this process, NALC is well prepared to fight like hell for a better contract in interest arbitration, and that is exactly what we will do if the Postal Service is unwilling to reach agreement on terms that fairly compensate and reward our members. Build a Fighting NALC is a reform movement within the National Association of Letter Carriers. They also put out a statement on the contract. They said members of the National Association of Letter Carriers rejected the sellout national agreement with a turnout of 48%, compared to a turnout of only 63,000 votes total for the previous contract. This result is a victory for our union and a rejection of the current national leadership and its approach. Hundreds of letter carriers joined Build a Fighting NALC in organizing the first real Vote No campaign in NALC since 1978, working alongside other forces in the reform movement like Concerned Letter Carriers and Caref for President to build the campaign. We organized parking lot meetings and rallies to discuss the TA, organized Vote No group photos in stations and parking lots, and passed Vote No recommendation resolutions at general membership meetings in 55 branches across the country, including Branch 9 Minneapolis, Branch 41 Brooklyn, Staten Island, Branch 79 Seattle, Branch 34 Boston, and many more. It was this organizing at the station and branch level that pushed the no vote across the finish line. I won't read the entire thing, but they say several branches across the country, including Branch 9 in Minneapolis and Branch 1100 in Los Angeles, will be holding contract rallies in the 15-day window where NALC and USPS can renegotiate the contract. We have no illusions that we can rely alone on having a strong case in arbitration. We need to publicly demand a strong contract. Our strength is our 290,000 members and our millions of supporters across the country. We need to demonstrate that strength, and for this reason, BFN demands NALC national leadership joins with these branches and calls for national contract rallies as we head into arbitration to win over the general public to our side and to show the arbitrator why we voted no and what we demand. Here to talk to us about the rejection of the tentative agreement is National Business Agent for Region 3 of the National Association of Letter Carriers, Mike Caref. Also a candidate for president in the 2026 elections of the NALC. I will note for the record, the Valley Labor Report is not endorsing any candidate, and over the course of the campaign, any candidate is welcome to come on the show at one point or another, but we are not talking about the campaign. At this time, we are simply talking about the contract rejection. Mike Caref, welcome to the program. I don't hear Caref.
You don't hear me?
Okay. Now I hear you. Welcome to the
okay.
program, Mike. Thank you for taking the time.
Well, good afternoon again.
Yes. Good afternoon. Great to hear from you. So what are your initial reactions to the results of the vote?
Man, we're overjoyed just because when we first, you can go back to the pandemic, really. We worked through the pandemic. We didn't miss a day of work. It was very scary for letter carriers. There was a lot of talk of hazard pay. Some other workers did get hazard pay. We didn't. We had a collective bargaining agreement. And we just kind of we're out there, we're working. And when the contract expired, we started negotiations February 22nd of 2023, almost 2 years ago, on a new contract. And so we get into the end of the contract, which was, 90 days later, May 20th, 2023, and there's no agreement. And, at that point, we had the right to go to arbitration. And mind you, we won the right to go to arbitration. We went out on strike in 1970. When the carriers went on a strike at that time, they changed everything. They changed the law. It went from the U.S. Post Office to the United States Postal Service. We had real collective bargaining, negotiating directly with the employer for a contract. And what the law said is that if we didn't come to terms with the Postal Service, that we had the right to take our case to a neutral arbitrator. Really, it's a tri-party arbitration panel consisting of one person from the NALC, one person from the Postal Service, and then a neutral arbitrator. And we had that right, and the arbitrator would make their determination, or the panel would make their determination based on the comparability standard, comparable in pay and benefits to those in the private sector of the economy of the United States. And it clarified that it would be a career job. And so we had this kind of leverage, and we saw what was going on. That was when UAW was doing a lot, when the Teamsters were doing a lot with the United Parcel Service. And we saw this going on, and it was like, okay, now is our turn. Now is our turn to get rewarded for the work we did through the pandemic and just, the daily grind. So the job had gotten a lot harder over the last few years. We've gone through this period where we're on the street a lot more. We're being harassed a lot more by the supervisors. They have GPS on our scanners now, and they know what we're doing at all times. And they're constantly questioning us about every single minute of every single day. Like I say, we're out on the street for a longer period than we've ever been. The job is very physical, as well as, dealing with the public, being the face of the Postal Service. A lot of little things like our uniform costs have been going up greatly. So we're really looking for this contract to kind of solve this problem, to right size the situation, to make it, so that the job that we once knew, which was a great job, which put us solidly in the middle class, which was a dignified job, a job you could be proud of, a job you pass on to your kids and your kids' kids. That job in service of the American people had just been deteriorating. And we thought that the contract needed to right that. And so at the end of that, at May 20th of 2023, we didn't have agreement with our employer, the United States Postal Service. We didn't go to arbitration. And the president of the union, who oversees the collective bargaining process, was continuing negotiating. And we don't, it was secret negotiations. And the Building a Fighting NALC, who you quoted, really came out and said, why do we have these secret negotiations? And they're absolutely right. Why is it not transparent? Why do the members of the union not know what is being negotiated on our behalf? This is our contract. It's our livelihood, But that was not the president's strategy. He said, no, I'm having these negotiations with the Postal Service. And those went on from May of 2023 I mean, the negotiations had started in February, but they were ongoing. We did not go to arbitration, despite the president telling us, "Hey, we have an arbitrator picked out, a neutral arbitrator." Okay, are we going to have hearings? No, we're still talking. We're gonna see if we come up with a deal. And it went all the way until October the 18th of 2024, like 500, 600 days, 20 months of negotiating. And, every carrier is like, okay, well, I didn't, I was a little different, but a lot of carriers had optimism. They're like, if it's taking this damn long, it must be pretty good. We must be getting, whatever. And when we saw the terms, we're like, this is a slap in the face. Not only did it continue the non-career classification of CCAs, city carrier assistants, which has, really decimated the craft. Quality workers don't want the job, and people are leaving the job in droves. It's not really a career job anymore. And the non-career job, it really sucks. I mean, even when you become career, it takes way too long to get to the top of the pay scale, and there's a lot of other issues in there. But the non-career job is just like a non-starter in today's economy and what we're dealing with as far as what the job has become. And so that there was no change whatsoever in the non-career classification, not even a reduction in the time. So right now the rules are that you can spend no more than 2 years as a non-career CCA, and then they have to convert you. If there's a vacancy in that post office, they'll convert you prior to the 2 years. But with or without a vacancy, it'll be 2 years. And, we won that in the last contract. And so we're looking for some improvement on that. We're looking for some improvement in the pay, which is, in 2012, the last time we had a non-career workforce, which was known as transitional employees, those carriers were starting at $22.15 an hour back then in 2012. So in today's wages, that's like $29, $30 an hour if you adjust for inflation. And the terms of this tentative agreement had CCA still making $20 an hour. And even at the end of the contract, it would be like $21 an hour at the most. And we're like, no, no way. But you don't know what everyone's feeling. And so a lot of the branches, including my branch and a lot of other branches, were very active in mobilizing the membership. There was a lot of rallies. We had a lot of rallies on Columbus Day, the Indigenous Peoples Day in October, all around the country. And we had a lot of motions in local branches to support a no vote, to endorse a no vote, encourage the membership to vote no on the contract. And you think, okay, this is the will of the carriers, but you just don't know. I mean, the president of the NALC spent a lot of our money and resources and time, trying to sell this thing. And his selling point was, this is the best we're going to get from the Postal Service. And, as you see the results finally come in yesterday, it's like the best they can offer is not good enough for us. They're going to have to do better. And if they're not willing to do better, then we're going to have to force this thing in front of a neutral arbitrator to get some better terms.
Hey, 5 seconds. Just wanted to say that this is only possible because of our donors. If you want to see more of this, then consider donating yourself at tvlr.fm/donate.
I would just say, I'll mention this, and this is something that I've thought a lot, but the language about the compensation of the postal workers and letter carriers, as you mentioned, is there's some language about like it should be comparable to pay in the private industry, and that's all. That language has always been kind of used to justify like, oh, they make 85% of what they would in the private sector or whatever. But you could also be comparable while being paid more, right? I mean, you could theoretically have a postal service where postal workers and letter carriers make 115% of what they would make at UPS or somewhere else, right? I mean, there's no reason that you should have to make less than you would if you worked in the private sector. And in fact, I think that there's a strong case that it should be higher, for one, because it's the government, and the government should be like an ideal employer. We should be, as a people, as a public, kind of putting out what we want, as like a guide for other people. We should be a high road employer, but also because we as a government have an interest in attracting the best talent. And it's going to be difficult to get the best people for the job if you don't pay as much as other people, right? I mean, has that argument ever been pursued? Like, yes, we should be paid comparable to the private sector, so we should be paid 110% or 115% of what they make at UPS instead of 85%. Has that ever even been like argued?
You know, the arbitration hearings that have taken place. So we started the collective bargaining process in 1970, and I think we went to arbitration about 6 times since then. But there's not like, there's not a live stream or, a transcript, or so I don't know exactly what's been argued. I sat in on the last arbitration that we had. We ended up coming to agreement with the Postal Service, but they had hearings for like a couple, 3 months in late 2020. And then we ended up coming to agreement, I think in December of 2020, and we ratified that contract in 2021. And by the way, we ratified that contract with 96% approval of the contract. So
wow.
When you talk about the effort that it required to move that thing in the direction of the membership voting no and voting no overwhelmingly, there's a sea change out there. There's a sea change that apparently, the president of the NALC is kind of not aware of. But, what was once acceptable is no longer acceptable. And so there's a change. But to your point, UPS drivers are making now $45 an hour top. And once they become a driver, which it's hard to start as a driver in their contract. Sometimes you have to start in the warehouse job and part-time work and stuff like that. But once you become a driver, it's 4 years till you get to the $45. We are currently at $36, $37 an hour top. And even with the, raises and stuff like that in the tentative agreement, even we would only get to like $41, $42 an hour in 2026, in November of 2026. And by then, well, in 2027, I guess, the UPS drivers will be at $49 an hour top. And then, of course, you look at benefits, and what we have very good is we have a good leave program, very generous, I would say, or, very quality leave program. And we have a quality retirement program. But some of the other stuff is not as good as what the UPS drivers are getting. So, you kind of look at comparability. It doesn't specifically say comparability to a similar job, although it's kind of, you interpret the law and you say, I think that's what they kind of meant. But it just says comparable to the pay and benefits in the private sector of the United States, the economy of the United States. And so, you could make a good argument that it should be more because of the requirements of the job. There's legal requirements. Everyone has to pass what they call a NALC background check, because you're handling people's mail. You're handling sensitive information. We're the face of the federal government in the community at least 6 days a week, every home and business in America. Not to mention the fact that it's a physical job, not to mention the fact that the job has become a lot more dangerous. We're being stuck up at gunpoint. We carry things of value. The keys that we carry are valuable to some people. The checks and the credit cards and the packages are valuable to people. And we're out there and we feel like, that's one thing that's, you talk about the disrespect on the job. The post office has postal police, and they only put the postal police inside to protect the real property of the Postal Service, and us, the humans that are out there on the street, we get no protection whatsoever. The police don't come out there and protect us, even as a deterrent, even driving around, even anything like that. There's neighborhoods in the city of Chicago where I'm from. Amazon will come drop the packages at the post office because they're not going to go out there and make those deliveries in those neighborhoods. Right. But the Postal Service is universal service. We deliver to everyone, everywhere. So there should be a premium associated with that. We saw that during the pandemic. It's like, you're essential. People need their medicines. People need to be able to vote. And so we're going to deliver the ballots. People, even when we deliver the masks, or we could deliver vaccines or whatever, anything that has to get to the people, that's an essential thing that's necessary. You have a network of people, and the Postal Service as a whole is a network, but we, the nation's letter carriers, are the ones that are out there performing that job. And so to make the argument that there should be a premium associated with that shouldn't be a hard argument to make at all. But you know, this tentative agreement, I mean, there was so much fuzzy math going on, and you know, playing with the numbers and making it seem like it was better than what it was, and it was like, you know, it just was subpar. It was subpar.
So it seems like from the statement that I read from the NALC and Brian Renfro that things are going to be moving pretty quickly now. He said that negotiations will begin within 5 calendar days of the results being announced, and negotiations will conclude no more than 15 calendar days from when the negotiations begin. So walk us through exactly what that means, what are the next steps, and what are the timelines for the union, and then we'll talk after that answer about the next steps for letter carriers and how letter carriers can build support for a strong contract.
Yeah, so you know, this thing is, so there's a 15-day limit in the constitution of the NALC. So basically, we informed the Postal Service, the members rejected this tentative agreement that we had with you, and therefore we want to reopen negotiations. And the Postal Service agreed. They said, okay, we'll reopen negotiations. And the Constitution caps that at 15 days. And then after that, you could call for a work stoppage, but the president of the NLC is not going to do that. I'm not even saying that would be that would be advantageous. But what we're going to do after that is go to the arbitration process. We're not sure what that time frame is going to look like. You know, one of the things is obviously we're going to get raises, and those raises are going to go back to the expiration of the contract. So we're currently working under the terms of the old contract that expired May 20th, 2023. So any raises we get in this new contract, they're going to be retroactive to that time, which means that, you know, back pay is going to be associated with the new contract. Whenever they implement the new terms, they're going to owe us money. One of the problems is we have people that have quit the job, and, you know, people that have retired, and you know, so doing that back pay is going to be complicated. But also, we feel like we're entitled to interest on the back pay because the post office has been holding on to our money for these last 2 years, and interest rates are pretty high nowadays. Yeah. So we have an interest in moving this thing along pretty quickly, but the Postal Service has the opposite interest. Right. They have an interest in just kind of delaying the thing further. So we really are monitoring that situation and really encouraging our president, who heads up the negotiating process, you know, to move this thing along as quickly as possible. Let's get this in front of an arbitrator. We're not very optimistic that the Postal Service, I mean, we negotiated with them for 600 days. Do you really think an additional 15 days is going to, you know, substantially get us a higher offer or a better deal or something that would be acceptable to us? But maybe it will. I mean, the president has indicated he's going to give a good faith effort, and that's the right move. That's absolutely what we should be doing. But 15 days is plenty. We'll see what they come up with. If it's something that we feel is worthy of, you know, going back to the membership for another vote, that's a possibility. We could get a new offer from the Postal Service and come back to the membership and say, okay, how about this as a tentative agreement? And we would vote again. You know, hopefully the vote won't take that long. The voting process took forever. You know, that's another problem we have, is the mail standards are deteriorating. And it took forever for people to get their ballots and return them in a mail ballot election. And we're the damn National Association of Letter Carriers. So, you know, that's something that we really have to address. But that's something that everyone in America is dealing with. The slowing down of the mail, is it on purpose? You know, that kind of thing. So that's really the next frontier after we secure a solid contract. The next thing is going to be dealing with the inefficiencies in the Postal Service and the gross mismanagement of the Postal Service. But we'll get to that, you know, kind of next. Right now, we got to make sure that we have a contract where people are going to actually want this job. And so we think that's going to be through arbitration. And we're going to try to do it as fast as possible. But there's no guarantee. The parties at one time, you know, like a year ago, had agreed to a neutral arbitrator. So I was saying the panel is one person from the NALC, one from the Postal Service, and then you have a neutral arbitrator. So we had agreed that Dennis Nolan would be the neutral arbitrator, but I don't know where that's at now. Is Dennis Nolan still going to be the neutral arbitrator? If so, does he have dates available? When are these hearings going to start? You know, are these hearings going to be accessible to the membership of the union? You know, it's our contract. So there's still a lot of questions about this whole process. But the first thing is the 15 days, and then The president has indicated that we will reconvene as an executive council. I'm on the executive council of the NALC. There's 28 of us around the country that are on the executive council, and he's told us that we're going to reconvene after the 15 days to figure out our next steps from there.
You're not going to be reconvening before the 15 days to inform bargaining strategy for these 15 days?
No.
Okay.
The Constitution of the NALC puts all the power in the hands of the president to come up with the bargaining strategy, and he relies on staff and people that he thinks are most qualified to help him out in that process. And that's up to us to say when we have our elections every 4 years, whether we trust that person or if we want to go in a different direction. So he's our president right now, and he's going to go forth with the process and the procedures that he feels are best for the union.
We're going to go ahead and open the phone lines. 844-899-TVLR is the phone number, 844-899-8857. Mike, you're welcome to stay on and take calls from letter carriers if you'd like. I don't know if you have time. We normally wrap the show up at 12:30, but just because this is such a big deal, we're going to go for at least 20 to 30 minutes extra. We want to try to take a few quick calls. If you call in, please do be mindful of the fact that there's a lot of people that do want to get their thoughts in. So keep your calls to no more than 120 seconds, no more than 2 minutes, please. But 844-899-TVLR is the phone number. We'll go ahead and open those lines. We got a couple more questions from Mike, though, before we take calls. So we talked about the timeline for the union and what the timeline is for the union, the 5 days and the 15 days. What are the next steps for letter carriers themselves? What can letter carriers be doing over the next 20 calendar days? I mean, this is a pretty quick turnaround. What can letter carriers be doing over the next 20 calendar days and beyond to build support and build a public case for a better contract?
Yeah. So, as you and I discussed, one thing that we're going to be planning, and I know there's, a lot of different organizations within the NALC and people are doing different things, and there's no right answer or whatever. But one thing that we planned, through our through Caref for Prez campaign is a March on Washington. And the reason for the March on Washington is to get us together to make sure that both sides, the NALC and the Postal Service, who are, have their headquarters in Washington, D.C., that make sure both sides know what we expect out of a contract. And then the second thing is to build support amongst the public. Having a strong Postal Service that delivers everything and anything for free. You pay for postage, but the delivery is free to every home and business in America at least 6 days a week is a great service. And that universal service that everyone has come to expect from a professional letter carrier. You pay us well, you treat us well, you're going to get the best possible service out there. And right now, we can't even afford our uniforms right now. The dignity of the job. The Postal Service has all this damn money to spend on supervisors and people to harass us all day, but they do not have any money, apparently, to pay us a living wage, at least to start off with, and to make sure we're in proper uniform and things like that. So we think that our fight is everyone's fight, and having a strong labor movement is good for everyone. We have 300,000 members around the country, and we want everyone to help and participate in this. So we plan a March on Washington for March the 23rd. We just need some time to get it together, but we encourage all NALC branches and any other union labor group. Our brothers and sisters in the American Postal Workers Union are working without a contract under the terms of the previous contract as well. Hopefully they'll join us. Hopefully the National Association of Letter Carriers itself, our union, will endorse and support this march. So what we plan to do is come to Washington. Ironically enough, between NALC headquarters and USPS headquarters is that march is exactly 1.3 miles, which is 1.3 is the amount of the raises that were in the tentative agreement. Right. That it's like a curse word. 1.3. We're only worth 1.3%. What is this? So that is just an ironic thing. But that's just we're planning that march. And the second thing we're going to do is we've already put out kind of like a survey, and it's something where you can go in. It's a digital survey. and it says, here's my name, here's my branch number. Dear President Renfro of the NALC, dear Postmaster General DeJoy, here's the reasons why I voted no. And I want you to know what they are. And we're going to take all of those and we're going to put them into a letter format and we're going to deliver them on that day. On March 23rd, we're going to deliver them. We're going to deliver them to NALC headquarters. We're going to deliver them to USPS headquarters. And like I said, make sure that you mentioned like a 15-day window. I think this thing is gonna go on for a while. I think it's unlikely it'll be resolved in the next couple of weeks or even in the next month or two. And as it goes on, you know, we have to stay in the fight. We have to keep rallying. We have to make sure that we're getting the public on our side, other union members and other unions, and, you know, just get everyone together to, like I say, fight for a strong postal service and a good, solid middle-class job for our nation's letter carriers. I think that's in everyone's best interest. So we're gonna bring that fight forward.
Most federal workers that are under the GS pay schedule have, territorial cost of living adjustments. And that's something that I've heard a few times in the chat over the course of our contract coverage, that the only places in the United States that have a territorial, I don't know exactly the word for it, but a differential in pay is Alaska and Hawaii, and everybody else working under the NALC contract across the country gets paid exactly the same. So you work, in the ruralist of rural Alabama, you get paid the same as somebody in New York City. Do you think that the new contract should include a territorial cost of living adjustment?
Well, I will answer that with a no, but let me kind of explain. The reason why it has to be a no is because our bargaining strategies are set by our delegates to the convention. The convention delegates are the supreme body in our union and the National Association of Letter Carriers. And we meet every 2 years, and there's thousands of letter carriers that come, delegates from every branch all over the country. And this comes up constantly, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it came up last time we had the convention in Boston in 2024. And we voted it down. I mean, it was a close vote, actually.
Right.
But we voted it down. So the bargaining strategy is that we're going to negotiate a national wage. Now, there's a territorial COLA in Alaska and Hawaii, and that's per the law, but it's not per our contract. So our contract says every letter carrier is going to make the same amount. But all that means to me, and I did a stop in Boston, branch 34, Boston, Massachusetts, and that's a big deal for them. In some of the other high cost of living areas like San Francisco, New York City, Washington, D.C., the Florida Keys, this is a very big issue where, it's poverty wages compared to what may be decent wages someplace else. Right. But, all that means is that if you're going to have a national contract and you're going to have the same wage for every single letter carrier, that wage better be high enough for all of our brothers and sisters to live a decent life. I mean, we're negotiating a good contract. And if it's a bad contract for our brothers and sisters in Boston, then it's a bad contract for all of us. And that's the way I feel about it. And that's why these terms and this 1.3% and this, what they call diet colas, which is a cost of living allowance that's not applied across the board for everyone. These type of things, they got to go. They cannot be part of our contract anymore.
Yeah, I think that
if we get to the next convention and the delegates to the convention want us to negotiate that, then by all means, the president of the union would take that forward.
No, I think that makes sense. And I think, I think I had forgotten about that, but yeah, you're right. I mean, I remember that came up, and if the convention voted against it, I mean, I think that you're, more or less, obviously I don't think it would be illegal to pursue a different bargaining strategy, but I think that you would be morally obligated to follow the will of the convention there. So I think that's a good answer. Finally, and then we'll bring on a call. There's been some talks about privatization of the Postal Service. There's been some discussion of that, and I saw that there was a resolution introduced in the U.S. House, basically opposing any efforts to privatize the Postal Service. Do you have any reaction to the talks of privatization?
Yeah, we're going to support that resolution. It's just kind of a general resolution. But I will say there's a caveat to that. We're not in favor of anything that would deteriorate the Postal Service, United States Postal Service, the Universal Service Mandate, that kind of thing. But we do have a management problem. And the current structure that was laid out in the Postal Reorganization Act of 1970 They had postal reform was amended in 2022. We may need to look at that structure. And maybe it's just an internal thing where we got to have some more serious discussions with the board of governors and the people that kind of oversee the postal service. But this management that is currently in place with the postal service, they're horrible. They're horrible for the employees. They're horrible for the customers. They don't really care about the service to the people. The service standards have gotten worse, and they're not even maintaining those service standards that are on paper. So
Right.
there is something to be said to the point of why are these people in charge? It's you gotta deliver for the American people, and we would definitely like to work with the current management of the Postal Service to make it more efficient. We can get rid of half of these supervisors tomorrow, and we still get the job done, and we get it done better, without them. And that's going to save them a lot of money, and that's going to save the ratepayers who pay postage a lot of money. And I think there's a lot of things that we can do. But if postal management is going to dig in the way they've been digging in, and say we're just going to keep doing the things the way we've been doing it, then there's got to be a change there. So, but we're going to support the anti-privatization movement that has been introduced into the Congress. Yes.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.